Another huge interpretive question for how we're going to approach the book of Revelation is, to what extent is it symbolic versus to what extent is it to be taken literally, especially the middle chapters from, say, chapter 6 through 20, thereabouts. I already tipped my hand and showed my cards when I said that I believe in this, the idealist hermeneutic, the idealist approach to interpreting Revelation is most helpful, and that takes understanding those middle chapters especially as symbolic allegories. Now, even in saying those words, a lot of modern Christians are already opposed or feeling a cringe or concerned when you start talking about the Bible. Conservative, Bible-believing evangelical folks, when you start talking about symbolism and allegory, because there is, in certain circles of modern Christianity, and even if you don't belong to one of the more extreme branches of these circles, you've probably felt the pressure from certain dimensions of the Christian community that say the more seriously you take the Bible, the more literally you have to take it, that there's a correlation between taking the Bible seriously and taking it literally. So, for example, I mentioned Chuck Missler in an earlier video, who says that when you get to Revelation chapter 4, the church is watching from the mezzanine, and he also says that there's basically two camps out there: the ones who take the Bible seriously and therefore literally, versus the ones who don't take it seriously and instead see allegory and metaphor. I think I get where he's coming from with that, but I think it's a vast overstatement. Taking the Bible seriously, I would push back against that claim and say taking the Bible seriously is not always equal to taking it literally. When certainly, if the Bible itself, if God is the author, passages that he wants to be taken literally, certain to take him seriously is to take him literally. But authors, all kinds of authors, including the divine author of Scripture, don't necessarily, literal writing isn't the only form of writing that serious authors engage in. And if they're not writing a literal genre, if not intending to be taken literally, then taking them seriously is not taking them literally. So you take them as they want to be taken, just as an illustration, to get the gears going. We'll have more to say as we go on, but just one illustration. I mentioned the Chronicles of Narnia earlier. Say that someone comes along and says, we've been interpreting the Chronicles of Narnia wrong all along, and finally I've come along and I've got the right interpretation of it. We haven't been taking what C.S. Lewis said seriously enough. If he says that there's a wardrobe in a large country manor in the countryside of England, and that children who go in there enter into a different land where there's talking animals and a great lion named Aslan, by golly, I believe it. I believe that wardrobe exists and that the land of Narnia exists, and I take C.S. Lewis seriously. Nobody else is taking him seriously. They just take it as a story, but I take it seriously. So I think that this wardrobe and this land of Narnia exists. Now, let's see, that C.S. Lewis hears this from his grave. Is he going to rise up and say, thank you, finally, somebody is taking me seriously after all this time, finally? I don't think so. He didn't write the story to be taken literally. He wrote it as an allegory, and he wants it to be taken the way that he intended it, the way that he wrote it. So literal is not the measure of taking an author seriously. The best way to take an author seriously is to take them the way that they wanted to be taken. And so if they're writing a history that's intended to be taken as literal history, then take them seriously that that's what they meant. But if they're telling a story in an allegorical way, how about Jesus? When Jesus told parables and said that a man went out into the field to sow his seed, and after Jesus tells his parables in Matthew 13, Matthew's recording this in his notebook as he's going to write the gospel later, and he says, I have a few questions, Jesus. The man who went out to sow his seed, what was his name? What's his father's name? Where he's from? I just want to make sure I have the details, and if I have any follow-up questions, I'll go and ask him. Jesus would say, you missed the point. The parable is illustrating a lesson through a story. There doesn't have to be a man who went out to, Jesus didn't have a particular man in mind who went out to sow his seed. It's a story that illustrates a lesson. That's what parables do. Jesus was willing to tell parables in Matthew 13. Might he not be willing to tell parables involving dragon and beastly characters in Revelation? I would encourage you to at least be open to the possibility that the author intended to use symbolism, whether that be John as the human author, the Spirit, Christ, God as the divine author. That he wanted to use a plethora of symbolism because symbolism has benefits. Allegory has benefits. You can communicate things through allegorical stories. It's not that allegory or symbolism is inherently inferior to literalism. You can use the mechanism of allegorical storytelling to do things and teach lessons that you wouldn't be able to through literalistic genres. So we want to take the Bible the way it was intended to be written. What might that be? We'll continue looking.